Information is power. And in the darkest corners of the internet, a war is raging. A war fought in new ways by a new breed of revolutionary. They want information to be free, and will do whatever it takes to make it that way.
We are the Reed Boys, and we are the internet hate machine.
The next morning, the FBI shows up. They took down my door with a battering ram.
They're frickin' hackers with frickin' laser beams on their frickin' heads.
Anonymous seemed to know a whole lot more about what was going on in Tunisia than the Western media did, or even the US State Department.
You need to be aware of the fact that the skill sets are there to actually undertake some pretty serious activity.
This is the story of the internet pranksters who became freedom fighters. Their battle has exploded into the real world. They've taken on global corporations, governments have been toppled, and lives lost.
The more that governments and corporations are frightened of that, the better.
In this war, both good and evil thrive, and no one is entirely innocent. It's a tangled web of cyber-insurgency, espionage, and betrayal. This is the story of Anonymous.
We are Anonymous. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
It's 2010. Before Australian hacker Julian Assange goes on the run, he is busy publishing more documents damaging to governments and corporations than the world has ever seen.
I absolutely condemn the placement of this information on the WikiLeaks website. It's a grossly irresponsible thing to do.
From Australia to the US, Assange is hung out to dry, but he's not alone. An army of insurgents are gathering in the digital underground. They'll stop at nothing to hit WikiLeaks' enemies where it hurts.
I thought of WikiLeaks as a truth teller, as a whistleblower, as an organization that was very important public service. Not to just the US, but to Australia, to pretty much every country that had cables leaked. I just realized I could use social media to just spew this hate that I have right now without having to worry about reprisals.
When governments pressure finance companies to block the flow of donations to WikiLeaks, hackers crash the websites of PayPal, MasterCard and Visa. They call themselves Anonymous. No one knows where they come from, yet they make front-page news worldwide.
They are hackers on steroids. If you fight back, watch out.
But who are these hackers?
I think it's impossible to tell the story of Anonymous and the history of Anonymous without actually looking at the history of 4chan and 888chan and all of these sort of image boards that have become the dark beating heart of internet culture.
That became a hotbed for people posting the raciest images they could find, the stupidest stuff they could find, and also some of the cleverest and most creative stuff they could come up with. Because it was a no-holds-barred, completely anonymous, free-for-all forum.
You'll find every disgusting piece of internet vomit on that, on that board.
This is where people come to hate. And I think in an interesting way, that is a good breeding ground for something like Anonymous.
You are accountable to no one on 4chan, no matter how vile or how silly your post.
It's where lolcats came from. You know, everyone loves lolcats. Most people who've heard of lolcats have never heard of 4chan. That's where it came from.
Out of 4chan, a new online blood sport is born.
Trolling, oh man, I mean, is to understand how to be the most annoying asshole you can be. If you can get under someone's skin, and if it's somebody that you don't like, you know, kick them off your side of the internet any way you can. You need to find out what things set him off and push those buttons every time you can.
It was interesting to see what could be done even in terms of online pranks. Things that didn't really help anybody, but which ended up drawing the resources and ingenuity of thousands of people who had never met. And I think a number of people, including myself, got a sense early on that there was some power locked up in all of this.
But the 4chan website offers something more. Those who post there are all anonymous.
And so Anonymous became synonymous with the hive mind, the collective unknown person, the faceless masses. And so everyone started referring to each other as Anonymous. Hello, Anonymous. I'm referring to Anonymous who posted at this time. and that became the collective noun for every single user on this site.
The new hive mind is galvanised by its shared belief that all information on the internet should be free. Anonymous will attack anyone who imposes censorship, like the Church of Scientology.
The internet underground has been at Scientology's throat for a long time. Scientology is shrouded in secrecy. It was written by a science fiction author, and a lot of nerds on the internet in the early days were curious about Scientology, and to get that information you have to pay a lot of money. Hackers don't like paying for information. One of the original hacker ethos was information wants to be free. So hackers made it their aim to steal that information and distribute it for free so that people could really see what Scientology was all about. And Scientologists went after hackers and shut down websites, and they had a very chilling effect on the early internet.
Full of rage, Anonymous launched Operation Chinology, the first battle against censorship in a new kind of war.
Leaders of Scientology, we are Anonymous. Over the years, we have been watching you, your campaigns of misinformation, your suppression of dissent, your litigious nature. All of these things have caught our eyes. Anonymous has therefore decided that your organization should be destroyed, for the good of your followers, for the good of mankind, and for our own enjoyment.
It immediately established a kind of iconography of aggressive activism. The boldness of it was what was compelling.
So much of the success of these operations is wrapped up in the success of the marketing.
Knowledge is free. We are Anonymous. We are Legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
That particular video very quickly managed to get picked up, go viral. I really got a chance, I guess, to see how this kind of unprecedented digital insurgency develops and how the media plays into it.
To block access to the Scientology website, Anonymous borrow a trick, road-tested by the Russian mafia, DDoS.
A distributed denial of service attack is where you use typically a botnet or a large network of computers to all flood a particular service.
Anonymous brings down Church of Scientology public information website. Attacks continue for 5 days. 3.6 million malicious emails. 141 million hits against church websites.
That transformation from pure trolling to, street demonstration and protest activity is a little bit magical, I guess, at some level.
You don't know the half of it. I mean, there's been some sick and crazy stuff that has happened in protests for the Church of Scientology. Some guys I know in New York City, one of them put Vaseline on his whole body, and then they covered him with pubes. I mean, pretty gross. And they charged him in the church, and he just ran around with pubes all over his body, and, nobody was going to touch him. When the Church of Scientology started to track protesters of the church, they wanted a way to hide their face, so they grabbed a mask, and it sort of just caught on organically.
The reason that the Guy Fawkes mask was popular was because the film V for Vendetta, which the term was based on a graphic novel, both of which have revolutionary undertones.
I got involved in December 2010 with Anonymous when it became painfully obvious to me that Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal became instruments of U.S. foreign policy.
We learnt that PayPal, Visa, and MasterCard were refusing to process donations to WikiLeaks. And WikiLeaks is heavily reliant on donations. So this was a strangulation of WikiLeaks.
I think they showed the world that they were clearly lapdogs for the U.S. government and had no backbone of their own. I felt that this kind of censorship had to be pissed on very loudly.
The atmosphere was highly charged. I mean, there were prominent US figures calling for the assassination or execution of people associated with the leak or of Julian Assange.
Information warfare is warfare, and Julian Assange is engaged in warfare. Information terrorism, which leads to people getting killed, is terrorism, and Julian Assange is engaged in terrorism.
Anonymous erupts out of the underground. Operation Payback is their most daring attack yet.
They're attacking the Australian government right now.
Operation Payback was a kind of watershed event, and the reason was because it really illustrated, I think, both the fact that Anonymous had become activist/politicized over a key issue. You can't just shoot the messenger. You can't shoot the messenger who's the media because you don't like what they're publishing.
The sheer scale of the operation announces the collective's power like nothing before. Politicians are alarmed. Battle lines are drawn. Law enforcement is called in.
We've got some pretty skilled hackers out there and some pretty skilled people involved in these denial of service attacks. And the potential is that they could actually turn and become a lot more potent than what they are. And we need to be aware of the fact that the skill sets are there to actually undertake some pretty serious activity.
And in January 2011, the war gets serious. The online battle spills into the real world when Anonymous joins violent revolts against North African dictators. It ignites when WikiLeaks publish evidence of the Tunisian president's corruption and decadence. President Ben Ali bans online access to WikiLeaks, and chat rooms fill with the rage of anons within Tunisia and around the world.
Tunisian anons, in appealing to anons there from other countries who are on that server to get involved and help figure out a way to make these revolutions a bit more viable. When that began to happen, I went from an observer to a participant.
There was a real debate about should there be some sort of probably denial of service attack or defacement of government-aligned media organisations in North African countries.
This is sort of a grey area for me. On the one hand, we who hate censorship would turn around and point our lasers at servers and take them offline. I feel that DOS is a form of censorship, so I want very much not to like that.
Even if the objective was to punish the government, it's almost the same as a food blockade against North Korea, that the only people who are going to suffer are the people themselves.
Eventually, on January 1st, the Anons launched their first attack on the Tunisian government websites, replaced a couple with messages to Tunisian people, knocked down others by what's called a DOS attack.
From his home 9,000 kilometres away in Texas, Barrett Brown, among many hacktivists, is keeping the world updated and supporting the front line.
It certainly helped to have Anonymous involved, providing encryption software to those who were using Facebook and Twitter, by which to prevent the Tunisian cyber police from doing what's called phishing on activist Facebook accounts, taking them over and thus being able to identify the major participants.
They helped people protect themselves online. They taught people how to use IRC and use their mobile phones safely. I think they deserve a lot of credit, the Anons who were involved in the various Arab Spring ops.
They seemed to know a whole lot more about what was going on in Tunisia than the Western media did, or even the US State Department.
I don't know, I feel like activism was sort of walking along, and all of a sudden we all broke into a dead sprint.
For many living under dictatorships, the swift ousting of Ben Ali in Tunisia is all the encouragement they need. People across the Arab world rise up in defiance of despotic rulers.
By the time we got to Egypt, we had telecomics jury-rigging dial-up internet access for when Mubarak shut off the internet. There were other groups trying to resuscitate ham radio to kind of maintain communications. Anonymous was randomly faxing material into the country, trying to provide access to information that was being blocked by the regime.
While in the Arab world, the hacktivists are helping overthrow tyrants, back in the West, the law is closing in.
I think there were a couple of victims. They encouraged a lot of new people to get involved. And so you would have high school students, housewives, non-technical people, whatever, who were recruited to run a DDoS application. And as it turned out, the application left footprints all over the place, so it didn't take law enforcement a long time, to find out many of the kids and people who are running this.
25 hacktivists are arrested worldwide, and Anonymous is now on the wanted list of numerous law enforcement agencies. In the US, one man thinks he can ambush the outlawed hacktivists. Aaron Barr, CEO of the cybersecurity company HB Gary Federal and self-styled bounty hunter, is riding to the aid of the FBI.
Aaron Barr, who's like an ex-mill-industrial type, started mouthing off to the press about how he had identified key members and organisers of Anonymous, which, just generally speaking, is a fairly unwise thing to do.
In the online underground, this means war.
The first thing we did after seeing that article was we wrote a little goofy press release. I called it Anonymous Concedes Defeat. A couple hours after that, I was informed that they were going to go ahead and hit HB Gary.
So the ultimate way to hack somebody in the underground would be to get their docs, would be to find their personal information. Because if you know everything about them, but they don't know anything about you, then you control them, you own them completely. Because you can destroy their life. You can ruin their job, you can ruin their family life, you can ruin their career, you can ruin everything about them.
Sabu, the hacker's ringleader, easily discovers a chink in HB Gary's armour. They have Aaron Barr's passwords, Kabafo33. They are in.
Now, where it gets genuinely hilarious is where we realise that the people like Aaron Barr were actually recycling their passwords through various systems. Now, this is just an operational security no-no. You don't recycle passwords. And the reason you don't recycle passwords is in case someone obtains one, they can't just then go and use it and attack all of these other systems that you log into, and that's exactly what happened.
You have blindly charged into the Anonymous hive, a hive from which you've tried to steal honey. Did you think the bees would not defend it? Well, here we are. You've anchored the hive, and now you're being stung. It would appear that security experts are not expertly secured.
It's the hack with the lot. As well as Barr's list of anonymous members, 60,000 emails from HB Gary employees are downloaded and in no time go viral. Aaron Barr and his security firm HB Gary are laughingstocks.
The list that was eventually released of so-called anonymous members featured anyone that had been publicly associated with Anonymous in any way at all. I was on the list because I had gone into the relevant IRC channels to see what was going on with the Arab Spring and had made no bones about who I was. I called myself something mysterious like Bernard Keane of Crikey. Well, that's pretty funny, and I had a good laugh at seeing my name on that list, but unfortunately the history of counter-terrorism in the United States is that innocent people get hurt. Innocent people wind up at Guantanamo Bay. Innocent people end up in court fighting for their freedom. That's where this issue stops being funny and starts being more about the fact that we have created this world in which, in a desperate effort to get government money, people compile garbage and then on-sell it to other people who treat it as real.
With the success of the HB Gary hack, Anonymous seems invincible. It gives them gigabytes and gigabytes of US secrets. Information is power, but power corrupts. In May 2011, an anarchic splinter cell breaks away from the hive.
LulzSec were people who felt that they didn't really need the rest of Anonymous, that they were carrying a lot of the weight on their shoulders themselves, and thus could do what they wanted to do.
These guys were just so brazen. That was